Story title: Billionaire Buried Alive, Saved by a Stranger. The cemetery was eerily still under a gray, hesitant sky, the kind that pressed its weight on the shoulders of those who dare to gather. White tents, flapping like fragile wings in the mild wind, sheltered the mourners, all dressed in black, faces solemn, eyes downcast. Beneath the largest tent, a golden casket gleamed cruelly in the daylight. Perched above a fresh grave lined with cement, the earth waiting hungrily, Judith Anderson lay motionless on the casket, her pale skin almost glowing against the gold, cotton tucked in her nostrils, her eyes closed as if dreaming a dream no one was meant to witness. Beside her, William Anderson, her husband, stood stiff, handkerchief folded neatly in his hands. His eyes glistened with tears, or so they appeared. A pastor cleared his throat, and two grave workers moved toward the casket, ropes in hand, ready to lower Judith into the waiting earth. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then a voice ripped through the air, sharp and urgent, like a thunderclap. "Stop. Don't bury her." Shock hit the crowd like a sudden storm. Phones were raised as mourners craned their necks to see who dared disrupt this solemn ritual. From the back, a figure emerged, moving through the sea of black. His coat was tattered, brown and battered by years, his beard wild and unkempt, hair like a dark halo of neglect. A dirty bag hung from his shoulder, sagging with the weight of a life no one had spared him. He stopped at the edge of the casket, pointing at Judith with a trembling but firm hand. "She's not dead," he said, voice raw yet unwavering. "I said don't bury her." Murmurs spread to the crowd like wildfire. "Who is he?" someone whispered. "Homeless man," another muttered. Guards approached, their polished shoes crunching on the grass. But he sidestepped them, his presence commanding attention. "My name is Benjamin," he said, catching his breath but standing tall. "Listen to me. This woman is alive." William stiffened, his mouth tightening. "Get this madman out of here," he barked, voice cracking with a mixture of authority and panic. "Sir, you will respect the dead." "She is my wife." Benjamin shouted, unwavering. "She is alive. She was given a substance, a poison that slows breathing, tricks the eye, makes the body cold. She looks dead, but she is not. Give her the neutralizer." The crowd froze. "Neutralizer?" someone whispered, confusion and curiosity intermingling. The tension was palpable. Cameras tilted closer. Reporters leaned in. William's face darkened, veins visible on his temples. "Enough!" he roared, pointing at Benjamin. "Remove him." But Benjamin did not flinch. He looked at Williams directly, his eyes steady. "You know what you did. And Dr. David knows, too." Dr. David, the family doctor, shifted uncomfortably. The stethoscope at his neck seemed a mockery now, a symbol of betrayal. William snarled at the pastor. "Continue the service." The pastor hesitated. His fingers trembled on his Bible. Benjamin took a single slow step toward the casket, his gaze softening as he looked at Judith. "Madam," he whispered almost himself, "hold on." Then, raising his voice, he commanded, "Check her mouth. Touch her wrist. Feel her chest. She is there." The crowd gasped. A woman in purple lace, hand shaking, stepped forward. "If there is a chance," she said. William snapped at her. "It is not necessary. We did everything." Benjamin lowered his hand and pulled a small brown vial from his bag. "Neutralizer," he said simply. "This will bring her back." Slowly, carefully, Judith's cotton wool was removed from her nostrils. Benjamin, kneeling, guided the liquid drop by drop into her mouth. Time stretched. 1, 2, 3, the faint cough, a twitch of her fingers. Then, undeniably, her chest rose. Her lips parted. Life returned. The crowd erupted into chaos. Williams lunged for a syringe hidden in his jacket, his greed exposed. But guards pinned him. Dr. David collapsed into despair. Benjamin held Judith steady, whispering comfort. Her eyes met his, filled with recognition and gratitude. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I knew the truth," Benjamin said softly, "and I could not let you be buried alive. Judith, trembling but alive, clung to him as sirens approached in the distance. The battle with death had been won, and one man, invisible for years, had become the unlikely savior of a billionaire. The courtroom was alive in a way the cemetery had not been. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, catching dust motes that floated lazily like tiny stars frozen in midair. Every seat was taken. Spectators pressed against walls and aisles, craning to see the woman who had defied death itself. Cameras from news vans lined the street outside, flashes firing as anchors whispered into microphones. Barely able to contain excitement, the story of billionaire Judith Anderson rising from her own coffin had gripped the nation, and now the stage was set for the reckoning. Judith herself entered the room slowly, supported by Benjamin on one side, her aunt on the other. Her steps were unsteady at first, but her head held high. Gone was the sparkling elegance of her usual wardrobe. She wore a plain black gown, yet in that simplicity lay power. Every eye followed her as she approached the front, the weight of survival and betrayal radiating from her. Williams Anderson sat in the dock, his hands clenched, eyes cold. The carefully constructed mask of grief from the cemetery had vanished, leaving raw fury and desperation. Beside him, Dr. David Afori sat trembling, a man whose guilt had anchored him to the floor of his own conscience. The stethoscope he had once worn as a symbol of trust now seemed like a chain around his neck. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp glasses, banged her gavel. "This court is now in session," she announced. State versus Williams Anderson and Dr. David Afori. Charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to murder, and gross medical malpractice. Let proceedings begin. The prosecutor rose, his voice cutting through the courtroom. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a simple dispute or domestic quarrel. This is a premeditated act of betrayal, a husband's attempt to take his wife's life, to seize her empire, a doctor, entrusted with life, complicit in her near death, and only the courage of one man prevented this tragedy from becoming irreversible." The courtroom murmured. Many glanced at Benjamin, now seated beside Judith, his coat tidy, beard combed, yet the lines of hardship still etched deeply into his face. He looked uncomfortable under the sudden attention, the silent witness to the nation's gaze. The prosecutor turned toward Williams. "Do you deny plotting to poison your wife with a slow-acting compound, instructing Dr. David to declare her dead prematurely, and planning a hasty burial?" Williams leaned forward, lips curling. "I deny everything. This is a word of a mad vagrant, and a woman too weak to understand her own body's failure. My wife was dying. I merely accepted reality." Judith's jaw tightened, her eyes, red from crying but burning with resolve, fixed on him. The crowd's murmur grew to a low roar. "You liar," she whispered, voice trembling but cutting through the air like steel. The prosecutor called the first witness. Chick, Judith's personal driver, a large man with honest eyes. He stepped to the stand, every inch the professional who had served his employer with loyalty. "My lord, on the night Madam collapsed, I drove her to hospital," he began. She was struggling, gasping, weak. Dr. David insisted I leave at the gate, claiming he would manage privately. 2 hours later, he told us she had died. I knew this was impossible. She was weak, yes, but alive. I should have done more, but fear held me back. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Judith covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks, memories of the coffin and the near burial flooding back. Next came forensic evidence. The toxicologist presented charts, slides, and images of the syringe found near the grave. "The substance is tetrodotoxin," he explained. "In low doses, it mimics death. It slows the heartbeat, masks breathing, paralyzes muscles. Without specialized equipment, a trained eye could easily be fooled." The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The truth was undeniable. Benjamin was called to testify. The crowd leaned in as he rose slowly, steps echoing against the polished floor. The oath was read, and he swore truthfully, voice steady. "I was under a bridge the night before the burial. I overheard Williams and Dr. David discussing a plan to poison Judith and declare her dead. I could not let them bury her alive. When the coffin arrived, I spoke the truth, begged them to stop. They called me mad. Yet her fingers twitched, and I knew life still remained. The defense attorney scoffed, voice dripping with condescension. So we are to trust the word of a beggar who sleeps under bridges? How do we know he isn't lying or being paid to incite chaos? Benjamin's jaw tightened. I have nothing to gain. I only speak the truth. I may be poor, but I do not lie. She is alive because I could not be silent. Judith's eyes filled with tears. God bless you, Benjamin, she whispered. Every ear in the room heard the sincerity and pain in her voice. Williams, cornered, slumped in his chair. Anger twisted into despair. I wanted it all, he finally shouted, voice raw. I loved Judith, but her companies, her billions, her power, I was supposed to share in it. If she had to die for me to live as a man, so be it. Chaos erupted. The judge banged her gavel repeatedly. Order, order. Judith rose, trembling but unwavering. Love is not stolen. Respect is not forced. You had everything. My trust, my life, my empire, and your greed drowned you. You tried to kill me, and in doing so, you buried your own humanity. Williams tried to lunge at her, but guards held him back. Dr. David sobbed openly. Collapse etched into every line of his body. Forgive me, Judith. I betrayed everything. I deserve punishment. The judge, gavel in hand, pronounced the sentence. Williams Anderson, guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy to murder, and greed of the highest order. Life imprisonment with hard labor. Dr. David Afori, guilty of betrayal of medical oath and complicity in attempted murder. Life imprisonment. Court dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed to capture the moment. Judith, exhausted, sank into her chair. It's over, she whispered. Benjamin shook his head gently. No, madam, this is only the beginning. Now you have your life again. What will you do with it? Judith looked at him, gratitude and quiet awe in her eyes. I wouldn't be here without you. You have no home, yet you gave me life. You saved me. Benjamin's throat tightened, tears threatening. I only did what I could not do before. My family, my child, I failed them. Not this time. Judith clasped his hand firmly. You did not fail. You were my miracle. From that day forward, Benjamin was no longer invisible. He stood tall beside Judith, helping rebuild her empire, guiding her decisions with insight born of hardship and brilliance. The heavy doors of Judith Anderson's mansion opened to a world she had nearly lost. The air smelled of fresh paint and polished wood, a scent that seemed to cleanse a memory of betrayal. Sunlight streamed to the vast windows, glinting off marble floors and golden accents. Yet nothing shone brighter than the hope that pulsed through Judith's veins. Benjamin walked beside her, the ragged man of the cemetery now a figure of quiet strength. The mansion staff paused to look at him, uncertainty mingling with curiosity. This was a man who had stopped death itself, who had risked his life for a stranger he barely knew, yet whose courage had changed the fate of a billionaire. Judith paused in the hallway, turning to him. Benjamin, she said softly, you will not return to the streets. Not tonight, not ever. From this day forward, you walk with me. Benjamin's throat tightened. Tears burned in his eyes, but he nodded silently. For the first time in years, he felt seen, truly seen. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Board meetings, media appearances, and interviews consumed Judith's schedule. Yet through it all, Benjamin remained by her side, not as a servant, but as an advisor. His sharp mind, honed in hardship, quietly began reshaping Anderson Holdings. At first, he performed small tasks, organizing files, checking schedules, managing correspondence. But gradually, his brilliance became apparent. One afternoon, during a critical board meeting, the company's presentation system crashed. Panic rippled across the room as investors murmured anxiously. Benjamin stepped forward calmly. Within minutes, he restored the system, reprogrammed the slides, and even improved the formatting. Gasps filled the room. Where did you learn that? Asked the director in disbelief. I was once a software engineer, Benjamin replied simply. The weight of his past life, lost and then partially reclaimed, hung in the air. Judith's eyes softened, pride glowing. From today, Benjamin is no longer a helper in the background. He is my special advisor. His counsel will guide this company. The board members exchanged skeptical glances, yet no one could deny the authority in Judith's voice. Benjamin's presence had transformed the room. As the empire stabilized, Judith and Benjamin spent evenings together, talking about life, faith, and the fragility of trust. She admired his honesty, his unpolished wisdom, the kind of sincerity that cut deeper than gold. Yet there was one quiet ache in her heart. Benjamin's love was elsewhere. One afternoon in the garden, Benjamin spoke with a rare excitement. "Judith, I want you to meet someone. Her name is Juliana. She brings light into my life. She makes me smile again." Judith's heart clenched, but she forced a smile. She had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that Benjamin might see her as more than friend. But reality stood firm. That night, Judith cried alone in her room, tears of longing, of grief, and of gratitude. By dawn, she resolved her pain into strength. If she could not be with Benjamin, she would support his happiness fully. When Benjamin proposed to Juliana months later, Judith insisted on sponsoring the wedding. "It is my honor," she said, her smile hiding the bittersweet truth. The garden overflowed with white roses and golden drapes. Benjamin, standing tall in a navy suit, waited as Juliana approached, radiant in white. Judith sat in the front row, eyes glistening, feeling peace she had not known in years. When Benjamin and Juliana exchanged vows, she clapped with genuine joy, whispering, "This is what he deserves. Love, laughter, a new beginning." But fate had its own surprises. At a charity gala, Judith met George, a businessman admired not only for wealth but humility and compassion. He saw her not as a billionaire, but as a survivor. Laughter returned to her life. Their friendship blossomed, eventually deepening into love. When George proposed, Judith said yes, embracing a second chance at happiness. Months later, life brought another blessing. Benjamin and Juliana welcomed a baby boy, Jonathan. At the same time, Judith and George celebrated the birth of their baby girl, Liliana. One golden evening, they gathered in the mansion's garden, babies cradled in their arms. Benjamin rocked Jonathan gently, while Judith held Liliana close. Tears filled their eyes as they exchanged glances, remembering how close they had come to losing everything. The weight of betrayal, the brush with death, and the long struggle for justice had forged them into survivors. "From ashes to dawn," Benjamin said softly, raising a glass. Judith whispered back, "Yes, from ashes to dawn." One figure remained in the background, Williams. In prison, his arrogance had crumbled. Each night, he replayed the moment Judith rose from her coffin, the power of greed replaced by regret. Letters poured from him, humble, soaked with remorse. At first, Judith ignored them. Eventually, she read one aloud to George and Benjamin, its message simple yet profound. "Greed destroyed me. Let my mistakes teach others." On the 10th anniversary of her survival, Judith shocked the nation once more. At a grand gala, she announced before family, friends, and press, 10 years ago, betrayal almost buried me. But today, I choose not to let hatred hold me captive. I forgive Williams Anderson. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is freedom. Gasps and applause filled the hall. Williams, released from prison, was now a frail man, his life stripped of wealth and power. Yet he carried one final gift, the lesson of humility and the knowledge that survival was more than physical. It was moral, emotional, and spiritual. Back at the mansion, Judith and Benjamin often sat together in the garden, watching their children play. They spoke not of betrayal, but of hope, of resilience, of the miracle of survival. Judith, gazing at Benjamin, whispered softly, "We lived through death, and now we live for life." The sun set behind them, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. The story of betrayal, survival, and redemption had come full circle. From the grave to the courtroom, from despair to hope, from ashes to dawn, life had triumphed. And the man who had stopped the burial, who had given her a second chance, now walked not as a shadow of the streets, but as a symbol of courage, humanity, and unwavering truth.